All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Eva Shepard-Nickel, and I'm the director for the Center of Entrepreneurship at CSU Chico, and I'm also the executive director for Chicostart. And today, Chicostart is hosting one of many workshops and other events this week for Global Entrepreneurship Week. And as part of that, today we're having a workshop on financial planning for entrepreneurs. And as part of this workshop, we're having that not taught by me, thank goodness. We're going to have this taught by one of my peers at CSU, and his name is Jaycob Arbogast. He is the director for the Center of Excellence in Finance, and he teaches a multitude of classes. He also runs a student managed investment fund,
Yes, I do.
right? And a whole host of other things that I probably don't know about, but he's a really great guy, and we're very lucky to have him here today. So before I transition, I just want to give a shout out to Cyril. I think Cyril's on here, and Thor, and Mr. Nadal. How? Okay, so MC Fiber Solutions, Applied Biotech, and Cal Poly Humboldt Library. All right, awesome. Okay, and we have some other people walking in the room now, and then we'll hand it over to Jaycob.
Excellent.
So first of all, let's give him a hand. Thank you. Woo-hoo!
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for coming, everybody. Let's all get settled in the session. So I'll just talk a little bit about myself very briefly, because nobody really cares about me and cares about the information. But my name is Jaycob. You can just call me Jaycob. I don't go by professor or anything like that. I don't care about that stuff. So I am the director for the Center for Excellence in Finance at CSU Chico. And what we do is, like Eva said, we do have a student managed investment fund. That's not really as applicable to what we're talking about today, but we also have a financial wellness clinic. It's a financial planning office on campus. It's not tailored to entrepreneurs. It's just open to the public, I guess. But you could come in there and ask some questions. The students that work there, the staff that works there are all, if they're students, they're seniors in finance, and so they're used to talking about business stuff, but they're mostly there to help with financial planning. So you could come in and ask about debt management or credit scores or retirement planning, any of those things, all financial planning type focus. So that's available in Glen Hall, and you can go to our website. I don't think I have a link to it, but if you go to cschico.edu/financial wellness, you can book an appointment with us, and it just goes straight to our calendar, and you can come get some help. So that's our program. And then I was a financial planner before I started working for Chico State. Now I teach financial planning topics. I teach personal finance, and I also teach accounting and corporate finance classes too. So that's kind of my background. So we'll kind of get into it. So I actually used to have a business here. I did some consulting for a bunch of the startups here years ago, pre-COVID, and then I had my own business when I was a financial planner. I worked out here as well. So I'm very comfortable doing at Chicostart. I didn't have to come looking for it or anything. I knew right where I was coming from. All right, let's get into it. So financial planning for entrepreneurs. I do have to, let's see, there it goes. So I do have to do some disclosure type stuff just because, general public presentation. I don't know any of you specifically and what's going on with your personal finances, your taxes, your investments, any of that kind of stuff. So this is generic information for the public, right? If you want to talk one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. And we can have some Q&A too. So just be aware, if I talk about some tax stuff, because I will, and I talk about some investing stuff, because I will. It's not like you should specifically do this. It's in general, these are some things to think about. So I'm not your financial planner. I'm not your attorney. I'm not an attorney at all. And I'm not your accountant. So you should talk to a professional. But cool. So we got that out of the way. Now we can talk about actual financial planning type stuff for entrepreneurs. US Bank did a survey or a study and found that 82% of small businesses fail because of management of cash flows, which I totally think that's probably right. Like, I mean, their study was pretty good, I guess. So, but a lot of businesses have cash flow planning issues, right? If it's 82%, that's pretty high. So that's the thing that you probably need to think about. But where does that line go? Cash flow planning for the business, cash flow planning for myself personally, where does that happen? And with entrepreneurs, there's usually a lot of blurred lines. So your business finances are very closely entwined with your personal finances, because if that's your business, that's your source of income. That's what you're spending money to live your day-to-day life. So I'm going to try to, one of the lessons I want you to take away from here is going to be to separate those things and kind of have, a little bit of a compartmentalized idea of your finances and say, this is the business's finances. I can pay myself a salary. I can pay myself an income from that business. And then this is my personal finances. And those don't have to be the same, right? Those can be two different things. And so now that we kind of approach it from that perspective, then we can kind of make some decisions. Okay. So in the kind of scope of financial planning, these are some of the topics, not all of the topics, but some of the topics that are super important to deal with your own personal finances and within your business too. So I tailored them a little bit. I took the CFP's financial planning topics. The CFP is the Certified Financial Planning Board of Standards. So I took their financial planning topics for people and just adapted them slightly to say, well, in a business sense, these are the things to think about. Budgeting is going to be huge, right? Capital budgeting, financial budgeting for your business. Credit and debt management. How are we going to fundraise our business, right? We're going to borrow money. We're going to get investors. What are we going to do? All of that to get money into the company. Risk management, insurance. I got some stories about failed risk management for myself. I could tell you some of those. I'll pepper some stories in wherever I can find those, but I usually have some examples of places where I failed, so you can learn from me, and we'll adapt and overcome. Investing, getting either investors into your company or what to do with any cash your business does have, right? Long-term planning with what to do with that money. Tax planning, absolutely a big deal. I don't think I need to hammer that point home. Everybody knows tax planning is a huge deal for businesses and for individuals. And then succession planning too. So that's going to be what's your business going to do in the future? Are you going to run that company until the end of your time, or are you going to sell it? What's going to happen afterwards? So some things to think about. I might just like ask some questions of the group too. And I kind of want, so we did actually a little bit talk about your bakery before we started. So I got that's one a little bit about that. I'd love to hear just kind of the kinds of businesses of who's here, because I don't know everybody, and there's people on Zoom too. So if those of you who are on Zoom are comfortable, maybe like unmuting and sharing, I'd love to just maybe quickly go around and I'll manage time a little bit. But if you have a business and want to share it, that would be awesome. So I talked a little bit about me, but
Let's start on Zoom.
Sure. And I'm going to go by who I can see on the screen. So I can see somebody from Humboldt, Cal Poly Humboldt. If you have, is that like a
His name's Cyril
Okay.
Overlander, and he's the dean of that library, and it's attached to the Chamber of Commerce up there.
Excellent. Okay, so he's the dean of the College of Business.
No.
Oh.
Let him introduce.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Cyril.
Hello, I have a student here who is graduating, who is interested in starting a nonprofit, so I'll let them speak, but thank you.
Absolutely.
About your business idea?
Yeah. Thanks. Hi there. My name is Jacob Simon. I am a super senior here at Cal Poly Humboldt. I was feeling very super about it too. Last year though, I'm out. So what the business idea is, so the nonprofit, to try to put this succinctly, because there's a lot of different business ideas that I have. And there's some of them that I actually want to keep very personal because I believe in them in a lot. Very low startup costs and very easily scalable. So it's a very unique idea. I believe in it a lot. But to give one idea that's sort of broad, but that is applicable to, I think, anyone. And I gave this, I'm also the president of the investment club, just also context. So I've had discussions about these sorts of things with the different members. One thing that I found as just this sort of broad brush that almost anyone can take under, you can go into areas and you can survey for things that, take appointments or things like gyms even, and you can find the areas and the places that are extremely overcrowded, and you can survey there and ask people, hey, if we had like similar amenities in this very close nearby building, would you go there as well? There's opportunity right there. There's a lack of supply and high demand. And a lot of these businesses are pretty straightforward. Gyms, for example, very, very straightforward. You just have a bunch of machines in there, a bunch of weights, and hire some people who are, personal trainers. Those people certainly, I think, as far as what I've seen, there's been a lot of people who go into that major of recreation, and there's a lot of opportunity there for them to, I think, participate in that sort of thing. And of course, combining the ideas of business and charity to involve the persons in the community to fight for something, I think is quite beautiful. But yeah, so just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. That's great. Cool. And we could keep going through. We can do some of the others. I see Thor. That's the name I can see. If not, it's okay because we can move. I see someone. I don't know everybody's name. Sorry.
Yes, I was on mute. Yes, I've been involved, born and raised in Chico, and been involved in a lot of the biomass renewable energy industry for many years, maybe sometimes too many, 40, and real interested in helping create new opportunities for small business development for, I guess, carbon sequestration and fire control, and defensive space management. So I'm really interested in getting connected to the younger generation. I'm from the old school, kind of one of the last of the pioneers. So working with Eva, see what we can do to go forward the next 40 years.
Excellent. That's awesome. So because I happen to know, has Thor connected with Ben Sampson?
No, not yet, but
Okay.
I know
Yep.
what he's up to. And
Cool.
when I get to that point, I will.
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. I got one other, someone else on here. Chuck.
Yeah, my name's Chuck, and my main business is MC Fiber Solutions, and we specialize in fiber connectivity, and it's mostly a wholesale business.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Let's do some people in the room too. I don't know. Is there anyone else on Zoom? I think
That's it.
Okay, cool. So then let's do in the room.
I'm a personal woodworking business.
Yeah, okay.
Reclaiming lumber,
Yeah.
early stage,
Making things too, like in a garage.
like live edge tables. Yeah, don't have a physical shop yet, just parents' garage, but
Yeah.
we'll get there.
That's awesome. Cool.
My name is Noah. I'm a student here at Chico. I'm majoring in small business entrepreneurship and management. And we're actually, through Eva, we're working on our own project, our own business that will be coming to fruition very soon in the next semester. Say kind of like a digital card sort of feature where it kind of removes the necessity of having X amount of business cards that you have to give out. It's
Yeah.
more like a digital sort of feature. We can just kind of tap it and
Okay. Like the RFID or QR code.
yeah,
something
NFC
like that.
sort of can't
Yeah.
scanner, that sort of thing, and having it as like a wearable merchandise as well.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Sweet. Cool. Okay.
My name's Ian. I'm also on that team.
Yeah.
I also have an idea for a business that takes like some outdoor recreation trips, like rafting or backpacking stuff to make some conservation initiatives.
Okay. Sweet.
I'm Emilio. I'm also part of
Yeah.
that group. But I guess personally, I want to start my own kombucha business.
Kombucha. Okay, cool. Like here in Chico and have like a storefront?
Yes, I
Yeah.
want to hopefully start at farmers market.
Sure.
Actually making my way into like Stovall and
Yeah.
day camp, hopefully. Like,
I've had some product, it's very good.
I'm doing a lot of R&D right now.
Yeah. That's awesome. I remember there's a store downtown here, Live Life Juice, and
Yeah.
before they were in that storefront, they were at the Chico, the farmers markets. And
Yeah,
when
so-
I was here at Chico Start, we did a bunch of marketing stuff with them. There's a marketing agency here that we. Yeah, that's awesome. And we all talked already, but if you want to just share for the rest of the group that came.
Yeah, I'm Ryan and this is my wife Maddie. We both run the Knot House. It's a traditional European bakery here in Chico.
Awesome. Cool. And then Eva, we all know Eva.
Well, I'm Eva and I run Chicostart.
Excellent.
Yeah. Nick?
And my name's Nick. I'm a full-time student. I also work for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Chicostart.
Awesome. Sweet, cool. Okay, so we went around and introduced ourselves, and that helps me a little bit, just kind of know the different scope of the businesses that are here too, so I can try to tailor as I talk. I'll do as best I can to say, oh, here's some things that might make sense. Okay, so let's kind of go through some of these. First, I'm gonna go back real quick. So kind of the areas of things to think about, cash flow, banking, that kind of stuff is gonna be kind of our foundation, right? We want to make sure the money, the cash flow is in the right place, and then we can kind of build up from there. So we're gonna kind of take it in order. Banking and budgeting first. How do you manage your cash flows? How do you manage the business? How do you deal with the banking? And so in creating my presentation, I wasn't sure everybody's background and I wasn't sure how much experience you've had with businesses. And so it sounds like some people have had a little more experience than others. Totally fine. So I'm just going to keep it from the basics, but we're going to have Q&A and stuff. And like, I'm happy to be interrupted if needed. And we can kind of, go a little bit more detail if anyone has questions. So first thing is your business as an entity should be separate from you, even if it's a sole proprietorship, like that's still in your head at least, but most likely needs to be actually separated, your business banking, your business finances from your personal finances. So if you have a bank account and all of your personal transactions and all of your business transactions are coming out of the same bank account, it's going to be really hard to manage that when you got to go file taxes, when you got to keep track of how profitable is my company. I don't know, because I keep spending all of the money on my personal stuff and not inventory, right? Super hard to manage. So I always have had a separate bank account from my business, and it's okay to have it at the same bank, right? So if you have, I'm just going to pick a bank not affiliated with anything. So if you have a Wells Fargo bank account, you have your own personal bank account there, you can separately have a bank account for your business, and they can be like all under the same name. And it's still like, I when I meet with people and I do one-on-one financial planning, I usually recommend having it at a separate institution, only for the sense that you don't want to make it super easy to transfer money back and forth willy-nilly, right? You want to have a little bit of a firewall there, but you can have them at the same institution. You can transfer back and forth. I would say don't do that unless you're keeping really accurate records, right? Because the record keeping is the piece there. You want to know, is the money coming into the account a contribution from an owner? Is it a sale? Is it whatever other thing that's going on in your business? It's hard to tell if it's just transfer from savings. I don't know. So you got to be able to keep track of that kind of stuff. So separate them, even if it's a sole proprietor, whether you're a corporation, your own business out of your home, doesn't matter. A separate bank account's a good idea. Your business will have its own income, its own expenses. It can own its own property if it's a separate entity. If it's a sole proprietorship, then maybe it's still under your name because there's no legal business entity there. But if you have a corporation, an LLC or something like that, maybe you can say it can have its own property. It can take on its own debts, but in the small business sense, a lot of time you're going to be personally held liable for that too. So you might have the business has a debt and you personally have signed on that debt as well. So just things to think about there, but don't commingle your business and your personal banking. You can structure a company. So again, this is like, if you've already started your business, you probably already thought about this, right? Is it an LLC? Is it an S Corp? Is it a C Corp? Is it just a sole proprietorship, partnership, those kinds of things? So those kinds of things, just things to think about. And then we can talk about those if anybody has questions about it, but that's kind of that's the foundation, right? Just have the bank account available.
You're good.
Okay,
You're good.
Okay, cool. So next thing, the budgeting piece, right? So if I just have the bank account separate, now I got to keep track of the budgeting. So in the personal finance world,
That's my fault.
no, that's all right.
We're
Oh,
just
just
trying
in
to see
case
if we could get
chats.
any chats.
Yeah.
Sorry
absolutely.
about that.
I think it'll probably pop up with a chat. It'll say, like, at least on mine, when I do it, it has this little like
Okay.
flag that
I
pops
just
up.
want to make sure we're
Yeah.
in tune. If there's something else.
No worries.
Let me pull that back up for you.
And I'm 100% happy to be interrupted. So if I'm talking and somebody just wants to unmute and be like, wait a minute, Jacob, what are you
Okay.
talking about there? I'm very informal when it comes to presenting. Don't worry.
Seem to have lost the slides here. Oh, gosh.
There somewhere. There they are. I could go off the cuff if we lose slides. I'll make it work. I'll just sit down and we'll just talk the conversation.
Indian style.
And,
Are we good to go now? I think we're
Fine with
good.
me.
All righty. Sorry about that.
Okay, so big deal here, have a written budget. It doesn't have to be written on a piece of paper. It just needs to be recorded in some way. So having a written budget means you can go back, look at what actually happened versus what you expected to happen and compare. And so you say, hey, I spent way over in this category. A budget needs to be categorized, right? And for a business, it might be how much do I expect to spend on inventory for this quarter? How much do I expect to have in cash in the bank at the end of this time period? How much do I expect to spend on whatever, right? But you might have a list of all these different topics. For a personal budget, it could be things like gas for your car and food and groceries and rent and all the other things that come along with a personal budget, and have those two different separate things because you want to keep track of where that money's coming and going. There's a bunch of apps that do this really well. And so in the interest of, I don't want to like recommend one thing, right? I always give a lot of different options. Here's 4, actually that's 6 really, but 4 apps and then 2 other choices. So Mint and Spendy and EveryDollar and YNAB are all great. Those are great options. I would guess, just from my own experience, is Mint is probably the more well-known of those. But YNAB is also very well-known, very popular. So Mint the only reason I think it's more well-known is because it's owned by Intuit, same company that does TurboTax and Credit Karma and MailChimp and basically every other entrepreneurial thing you've ever thought of. So they're pretty good, right? But the other ones are great too. Spendy's really good at showing graphs. So if you're way into visualization, you want to see like how the line chart of your spending has changed over time, or a pie chart of how big the little wedge is in your grocery bill and your rent bill and those kinds of things. Spendy's excellent at that. EveryDollar is designed to be a zero-based budgeting system, which I'll talk about that in a minute. And it's made by kind of a famous radio host person in the finance world named Dave Ramsey. Some people really like him, some people really don't like him. So I take a neutral stance there. But if you're into the zero-based budgeting style, EveryDollar is excellent about that. And then YNAB is a little bit more advanced because it talks about more about like investing and that kind of stuff. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget. And so it's a really good one too. It's I'd say probably a more robust backend on that. So just depending on your lifestyle, if you need a lot more tools, YNAB might be helpful there. And then I am extremely nerdy when it comes to Excel. I could do a whole semester teaching a class on how to use Microsoft Excel and every tool possibly designed to go with it. I love Excel. I do more things on Excel than is probably necessary. Like it's just my go-to calculator and it's my go-to everything. And I like take notes on Excel and like stuff that I don't need to be doing. Like I could do probably better options, but I just have Excel open all the time. So I'm into budgeting on Excel, and you can make graphs and there's all kinds of things you can do. So there's a lot of tools there. And for an entrepreneur, you might be doing like a pro forma for your business. You're going to say, I'm going to look at the next few quarters or the next couple of years of what I think my business is going to do in the future. Excel is excellent for that because you can say, here's where I am now. If this line item grows by 3% every quarter, and this line item maybe increases by a different percentage, I can project those out really easily on Excel. Personal budget, I can do the same thing. I think my budget's going to be in this range and it's going to change by this much every year. And then when I get to this point in the future, I won't have to pay that bill anymore. It'll be paid off. So now it's a zero and I can keep projecting. Excel's awesome for that. Or you can be like my wife, who loves everything to be written down. She's got all the different color highlighters. She like color codes everything. That's awesome. I love it. Like she's totally into that. And so sometimes she and I conflict in, I want it on Excel. She wants it like in her daily planner. So totally fine. It just depends on your style. But so, okay, cool. So that's kind of just some idea of budgeting and banking and stuff. Some budget styles. So these are the tools to make the budget. These are the styles of budgeting. So this 50-30-20 that's what they call it. It's more of a guideline. So it was made by Elizabeth Warren, who's a senator of Massachusetts, I think.
Yeah.
And so she came out and she's helped start the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also back in like 2010. And so she and some other people designed this budget system to be, if you're not the kind of person who wants to be really in the weeds, like every cent goes here and I got to know every piece of it. If you're not like that, because lots of people get a lot of anxiety around that's too much, right? That's way too in depth. That's too much detail. I don't need that. 50-30-20 is half of my budget goes towards these bills, right? With the other half, then it's close to half and half of that other half split going to paying off my debts, going to paying my needs, paying my wants, those kinds of things. You can split it into broad categories and say, now us in California, maybe 50-30-20 is a little bit different than someone in like the Midwest where costs of things are completely different, right? So for us, we might say, my bills are going to be a larger percentage of that pie, right? Not 50% or something. It just depends. Here in Chico, we're not like San Jose. So cost of living is like not as bad, but we're still like not Kentucky. So, you just gotta, no offense to Kentucky, but just like, lower cost of living state. So those are some things to think about, just broad categories, my regular daily cost of living, my wants, the things that, just the things that I want to do and things that aren't necessarily like I have to do, but they're just part of my daily life and that kind of thing. And then my paying off debts, savings, right? Just big, broad categories. Zero-based budgeting that's part of that every dollar. So that app that's called Every Dollar, they call it that because under a zero-based budgeting system, every dollar has to be assigned to something. So one of the things that you might assign it to would be rent. Another thing might be groceries. But then at the end of your budget, something else you might assign it to is building savings, right? Or paying off debt. And so you have all of your categories and every single dollar gets assigned somewhere so that at the end there's zero left over. That's why it's called zero-based. So nothing is unassigned and you know where every dollar is going to go. It's almost the exact opposite of 50-30-20, right? You're doing everything super detailed and you want to be right in the weeds with the budget. Totally good for certain types of people, not good for other types. So it just depends. But I like that one a lot because then you can say, this is how much I want to reduce this bill and increase this one. And so I can maybe, really tackle one budget item over another. Like, so I want to try to pay off that credit card. I'm going to lower what can you lower? PG&E. I'm going to try to turn off the lights more. I'm going to use my AC less, that kind of stuff. So I lower my PG&E bill a little bit and then really increase that payment to my credit card to try to knock out that debt sooner, that kind of stuff. Incremental budgeting is where you say, what did I do last month? And then next month, there's probably going to be similar, but maybe a couple changes, right? PG&E, and let's say I'm going to go difference between April and May for your power bill. Probably going to run your air conditioner more in May than you did in April. And so probably a higher budget in in May than in April in terms of how much you're spending there. So incremental budgeting says, look at last month, increase or decrease each item by a little bit, depending on what's going on in your life, and then see if you're in line with there. That's going to be more business focused. A lot of companies do that. They say, well, this is how much our division, a larger company would say, this is how much our division spent for their budget last year. And so we're going to adjust it slightly going forward because they have more or less employees, they have more or less things that they're doing, that kind of stuff. And then a pro forma is not really a budget. It's a schedule saying, here's what my company is going to look like going down the line, maybe next quarter, next year, next whatever. And you can kind of design, here's what I think my business is going to do, so that you can look and say, is it going to be profitable? Project that out into the future and say, is my business going to be making money in the long term? Is it worth it for me to keep doing this? Or should I just abandon this line of income or whatever it is that I'm working on? So those are different kinds of budgets. There's plenty others. Those are just the ones that I most see people use. Okay, specifics for business owners. So some businesses may experience some seasonality, right? So depending on the kind of business that you're in, I used to work for a company that's a commodities trader. So we would trade like wheat futures and gold, which doesn't really have seasonality, and like natural gas and all kinds of different things. And agricultural products have major seasonality, right? There's like a season for a particular product. So that's makes a lot of sense. And here in Butte County and just Northern California, a lot of ag. So if your business has some seasonality, some quarter, let's say a certain quarter is very profitable, and then a different quarter is very unprofitable, right? So you might want to just kind of try to balance that out. So a sinking fund is one that's not technically the right use of that phrase, but I'm gonna just use it anyway. So a sinking fund is one way you might approach that by saying, I'm going to build up this fund, this cash from my really profitable quarter, and then not touch it when I know quarter two is going to be bad because just of my seasonal business model. And then in quarter two, I can draw from that fund, right? So kind of spread out those over time. That's a really good idea. And then when times are good, you fund your savings. When times are bad, you draw from that savings, and it kind of levels out your spending over the year. And then longer term averages, KPIs for your business, saying, what's my profitability look like in the full year, not just in the one quarter, because it could have giant swings from one quarter to another if you're that kind of business. So that's just some things to keep, think about too. Other kinds of seasonality for like a retailer, right? Quarter four holiday shopping retailer is going to be way higher than the middle of the summer, right? You think like Macy's and stuff probably doesn't sell a lot or as much in the summer compared to in the winter, that kind of thing. Okay, that's it for budgeting. Everybody cool with that? Yeah, we got more stuff to go with too. So credit and debt, that's the scary stuff, right? Building a credit score. How do I like borrow money and then pay it back? And then I got this like interest rate and like scary stuff, right? So some things to think about when you first start a business, you're not going to have any credit history. Your business can't borrow money by itself. You can't say, hey, my company, blah, 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 LLC is going to go get a credit card. Nobody's going to give your company a credit card. They might give you one, you as a person, but not your business, right? So you're brand new. So what you can do is say, well, I'll have the business name. I'll have my name attached to it. If the business goes out of business, then the bank is probably still going to come after me as a person because they're not willing to take the risk on some startup, right? No offense, it's just startups are risky, right? VCs say no to people all the time. Same idea for a bank. So you say, okay, well, I can't get a credit history for my business. I can build it. I can start working on it. Dun & Bradstreet is a company that keeps track of business credit. So there's one way you can start is you can get a Dun & Bradstreet number for your company. And I never applied for one, but my business was registered as an LLC, and I went and looked, and they already had an account for me. Like they knew that my business exists. I assume because I filed LLC paperwork with the state of California. So Dun & Bradstreet's like, okay, it's a company. It was on there without me doing anything. I didn't borrow any money as my company ever. I did as myself, but that wasn't part of it. So you might already have one. If you're a formal entity, you might already have a Dun & Bradstreet number. You can just Google it and see if it comes out. But if you are trying to build credit over the long term, you want to be a bigger business that can borrow money on its own, those kinds of things, get a credit history for your business. And then when you have vendors who are, you're buying from them and you're able to maybe have some sort of deal where, hey, give me this much of whatever product inventory I'm trying to get, and I will pay it off within this certain time frame. Sometimes they say you got to pay it off within 30 days or some 60 days, whatever. It depends on the business. But if they do that, see if they report that to the credit rating, right? So that you can have credits, you can get credit for having paid your bills on time, and that's going to build up that history over time. So a line of credit is a good way to do that. So a line of credit is one where you can borrow from, you can pay it back, you can borrow again, you pay it back. People do that for the houses a lot too. A HELOC would be a home equity line of credit. People do that to make home repairs, but businesses can do it too, mostly for things like planning, inventory spend, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's just credit. So things to think about credit. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second and double check the time just so I don't go over. But what? Okay, we're good. What questions does anybody have as of right now? Let's drop that. As of right now, about halfway through.
I was gonna ask about that, the Duns and Bradstreets.
Yeah.
Like, what, exactly is that number? Is that just to like get you approved?
It's like an account.
Okay,
Yeah. So you say, my company has this like history. So it's the same idea as like a personal credit score. So
right.
you might have a credit score for yourself.
Mhm.
And if you go to, for people, it's Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. You go to one of those three credit
Right,
bureaus
right.
and they'll say, here's all the things that people are reporting that you have debts. And for you as a student, it could be maybe a student loan or a credit card or a car loan, something like that. But if you've paid those off, then it'll say good standing for those accounts. And then they say the biggest factors of a credit score are going to be, have you paid on time? If you've missed a payment, that's going to hurt your score a lot. And what is the amount that you owe? So compared to how much you could be owing. So if you have a line of credit, for example, you could borrow up to $10,000, for example. And if you've only borrowed 1,000 of that and you paid it off, then you're not maxed out on your borrowing. So that's a good thing, right? If you're constantly maxed out, like you got credit cards or something, and it's constantly at the edge of maxed out, it's not gonna look as good on your score. The other pieces are not as important, but they are factors. Is if you got a bunch of new credit accounts open, and there's not a lot of history, and you're kind of young credit, so to speak, there's just not history for them to design a score around.
Okay.
And then if you only have one type of credit, like all you have is one credit card and not a bunch of other choices, and there's also not a lot of history for them to design a credit score around that. So those are the other kinds of things. But businesses work the same way. So the entire idea of having a credit score for a person or a business is so that future lenders can say, this person or business is reliable in paying back the debts. So that in the future, when you want to borrow money to build a factory or some big thing, because your business is going to be huge, now you're like, hey, I can borrow $1 million or something, right? Maybe you don't, you'd have to be a pretty big company in terms of what we're talking about today, but you can do that someday, right? Microsoft was started out of a garage and now they have trillions of dollars. So in value, at least. Well, maybe not necessarily, actually. But yeah, in January. I did see a chat pop up. I don't know if I can open it.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
We'll open it this way.
Okay, you can just read it out loud or something. That's so.
How would credit reporting work with a private third-party loan?
Private third-party loan. So is it the person getting a loan for themselves?
I don't know.
Oh.
It's coming from, you want to expand on that, Cal Poly?
Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
so to clarify. So
That's okay.
what I'm specifically trying to speak on is I have a family member who just through I'm not even getting into the story, just through the weirdest series of events came into like some money. Anyways, so I was wanting to take a loan from them in order to support the nonprofit.
Got it. Okay. Yep. Got it. So private meaning from like a person rather than a corporate entity. Yeah. So if you are borrowing from like family or friends or just a person who's not doing it as a business loan, there's not going to be any reporting to the credit bureaus. So think about either a Dun & Bradstreet kind of thing or Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, any of them. They're not going to be told about that loan. So if, let's say I made a loan to you, I'm not going to report that to Equifax, right? It's just us. And if you don't pay me back, only we know about that, right? So there's not really going to be a hit to your credit score. But the other side is you do pay me back. There's also not a plus to your credit score. So that's not great either. So if the person you're borrowing from reports to the credit bureau, then it will affect your score, positive or negative, right? There's a little bit of a scale, seesaw kind of balancing there, but that's the idea about it. Oh, cool. Okay, so now we can talk risk and insurance. So, okay, I put just a list of things to think about for risk and insurance, and I know that's just like a wall of text, and you're like, okay, well, not every risk is a factor for every business. So in my business in financial planning, errors and omissions insurance, which is that fourth bullet point, makes sense for me because if I give someone specific financial advice and it turns out that was bad advice, they could come back to me and say, hey, you told me to buy this stock and it went up. You told me to buy Twitter or whatever, So like, okay, so that would have been an error, or an omission would be like, oh, I forgot to tell you like about this risk, right? So I could have insurance for that, so that if someone sues me, it's very similar to medical malpractice. If a doctor makes an error doing medicine, then they could get sued. Same idea. It doesn't apply to every business, right? So a retail type or a bakery, errors and omissions and malpractice doesn't really apply to you. Absolutely not. But maybe inventory, you want to have insurance on your inventory in case it gets destroyed or damaged in some way. That makes a lot of sense for a company that has inventory. I, as a financial planner, have very little inventory. There's not like I got some documents and like a laptop, but that's not It doesn't matter. That's not really inventory. That's like capital assets. So I don't really have inventory for my business. So I don't need inventory insurance. However, I used to have a retail company that had clothing. They did clothing. I sold clothing, and we had all of our inventory in a house in Paradise. And the campfire happened, and so that was destroyed. Right? We did not have inventory insurance. That's my mistake. I should have known better. I didn't. I cut corners. Sorry, that's just, well, you don't care. I care. So that happens. So just be aware of that, right? And actually, the place where it was smoke damage more than even like fire. So and it's clothing. We can't.
That could be even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not like we could wash them or anything. They were just done. We had to just write that off. So just things to think about. But then you have health insurance for yourself, right? If you have employees, you might consider having health insurance for your employees. There's group rates for health insurance that you could get if you have employees. Life insurance for yourself. If let's say your business is doing well, but there's some debt associated with it. You might have your own debt. You have a home loan, something like all kinds of different things come up. Life insurance exists to cover all those costs after you're gone. You don't want, let's say if you're married, right? So I'll talk about myself again. I am married. I have a wife. We have a son, and we have another baby on the way. So if I were to die, my wife would have 2 children to raise by herself, right? She could remarry. I wouldn't hold that against her, but that's separate. So, but I don't want her to have to deal with that, right? Be a single mom with 2 kids is tough to do. So I don't want her to deal with that. So I have life insurance for myself. So if I die, she gets $1.5 million, which is enough to cover the raising of 2 kids until they're 18 and then they're on their own. So like that exists for that purpose. A lot of people get sold life insurance when they don't really need it too. So there's a lot of issues in that industry. But if someone is dependent on you, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you have like a family and your income is maybe wholly dependent on you as a person being able to do it, because nobody's going to come take over your small business or something, life insurance is probably a big thing to think about. And then once you get bigger, you might need an employee insurance. So like a key employee, like a key person. Just in case your business is designed around someone who's like a really big figure there, right? That's more like personal brand if you're like an influencer kind of thing, but it might be something to think about too. So that's just a list of a bunch of choices. There's plenty of others. And I usually would recommend talking to a couple different insurance professionals just to get a sense of what things make sense and get a bunch of quotes. I always get many quotes, and then I shop around frequently again, just to double check to make sure, prices change over time.
Like for Chicostart, we have business liability, obviously. We have a board of directors insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So,
Okay.
and
Nonprofit.
right. And we also have workers' comp.
Yep.
So I think that's all we have right now. Yes.
Yep. Those are all important to have. And it just depends like what's going on in your business too. If you have no employees, then workers' comp maybe.
Right.
Yeah. But
I have that.
yeah. It just depends.
I don't have $1 million. Sorry.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, tax planning. This is the area that I talk with small business startups all the time, and tax planning gets to be the most confusing and the most mistakes made, because there's a lot of myths out there like, oh, you just write it off, it's like it's free. That's totally doesn't work that way. So things to think. So this is just broad overview. I'm not going to go super deep dive right now, but just things to know about. Your business needs to have 3 financial statements: an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows.
This should sound really familiar.
Yeah. If you've ever taken any corporate finance or accounting class, this is going to be this is it. This is what we talk about. So those are things you need to have. Now, if you're a small business startup, they don't need to be extremely detailed and extremely, it might just be pretty small, right? Your income statement could be, I had some revenues, I had some costs, and I didn't pay any interest because I don't have any debt, and I didn't pay, I don't have any depreciation because I don't have any major big assets, and then I just pay some taxes and I'm done, right? But if you're a large business, there's a lot of different things. I'll go into what they look like. So an income statement, I highlighted in green and red the biggest things that you need to think about. Sales, how much money you're making, absolutely. Then you can deduct, so you can take out your cost of your inventory, stuff that you bought that you're going to sell, your inventory, you can remove from your profit that amount. You can also depreciate. Actually, I should have made green the depreciation, because that's another area where if you have some big asset that goes down in value over time, actually it doesn't even have to go down in value. It could stay the same value and you can still write off depreciation. So depreciation is where you take that big asset and you spread out its cost over time. And so that you can take deductions in the future, even though you bought it in the past, right?
So for Emilio, that'd be bottling stuff. That for Ian, it would be like a huge van to carry all the crap or whatever. For Noah, it would be
Equipment, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, so the way to break that down, it's called PP&E, which is property, plant, equipment. If you have something that falls into property, plant, like plants meaning like factories that, plant, production plant, or equipment, any kind of equipment that you're gonna use for more than a year is gonna be a capital type project. So all of that can be depreciated. All of that can be written off. Now, that's not all written off up front. So it's not, I spent $10,000 on a van and now I get a $10,000 reduction this year. There is a way to do that, but you could separately say, I'm gonna use this van for 5 years. $10,000 means $2,000 a year for the next 5 years, right? And so now I get a $2,000 deduction next year, even though I bought the van this year, which means if I make more sales next year, I get to pay less in taxes by writing that down, right? That's the idea, because your first year, probably not super profitable, right? But you can make a lot of payment or a lot of purchases now, and then have a bunch of deductions in the next few years when you are more profitable. And now you don't have to pay as much taxes because you have all those write-offs going forward.
I have a question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So can you explain the idea of standard expense versus something that gets depreciated over time? Like I keep getting asked questions from my accountant, what's that threshold that we want to set for things that get expensed and then things that become an asset? Because it seems like there's something to be said, like a lot of times I always think about like I want to expense everything as possible, right? But then I believe that if I do that, then it could skew my balance sheet. That if I were to keep it as a depreciating asset, it would look more favorable in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I answer that question, I'm gonna go one slide forward to kind of double check on balance sheet. So I'm gonna talk about this while I answer your question. So if you were to do an expense, like let's say you purchase something, you're like, I'm going to expense that all in this year. That means you're not carrying anything forward. Everything comes off of your income statement right now. So I'm going to go back and forth between these two slides. So in your costs, you might have an expense somewhere in here, depending on what it is that you're buying, and that would come off right now. So you get a great tax break right now because you have a big business expense. However, next year, you're not going to have an item listed under property, plant, and equipment under your fixed assets because that was an expense thing, right? So that would have been a short-term type asset. So now you got, well, I got less in my long-term asset side, I got more in my expenses, right? You might rather say, if it's a big product that you're going to use for the future, you might want to have that in your property, plant, and equipment, your fixed assets. You might want to take some of that depreciation each year over a number of years. And different businesses have different kind of thresholds. And so this is one of those, I'm talking generally to everyone, and you specifically might have something different for you. But if you have an accountant, I would talk to them about what is the threshold for how long this thing is going to be in production. And so you might set a standard. Vehicles are going to be over 5 years or 10 years or something, and big buildings are going to be over 30 years or something like that. And then you have different standards for different types of equipment and things that you buy. And I remember you saying you're like fiber optic type stuff. So I imagine there's plenty of machinery related to that. I don't know that industry very well, but those machines might have a certain lifespan on them as well. Same idea, right? So you can deduct all of that up front as an expense, maybe, but then you'd be saying you're not going to use it for the long term, which probably isn't what really is happening. So it may make more sense, again, generic advice, it may make more sense to depreciate that over time so that in the future, you still have that ongoing deduction, having not made any new purchases, right? Does that help? Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So again, highlighted in green, the things that are going to be super helpful here. So this is a balance sheet. Balance sheet shows the things that you owe in debts, the things that you own in assets, and how you finance that with equity. So you can so the whole right-hand side has to equal the whole left-hand side here. The amount of all your assets has to equal all of your debt and equity, because in order to get an asset, you either had to get money somewhere, either borrowed it from a bank or a bond or whatever, you borrowed it somehow, or an investor funded it. And you could be the investor, right? It's your business, you could put money in yourself, or someone else could have put money in also. So stock is one way to finance. Retained earnings, which is historic profit of your business, is another way to finance through external and internal places. And then debt would be borrowing money. So all of those different things. However, if you're going to finance that way, financing through debt gives you a tax deduction because the interest you pay is deductible. Financing through equity does not give you a tax deduction. So there's your question there. If you're addressing it from a tax perspective, maybe you want to finance through debt. There's a little bit of planning, and this is what I did when I was doing, corporate consulting for finances. how do we structure that capital fundraising type pieces? Should we do a certain percentage of it in debt? Should we do a percentage of it in stock? And then maybe what we approach it one way or the other based on what we think our future revenues are going to be and how much we need to deduct. That's a little bit in the weeds for entrepreneurs, but it's just something to know about. And then if you have these assets, you can deduct that depreciation too. So if you're funding an asset with debt, you're going to borrow money, which you can deduct the interest to purchase a long-term project, like capital project, property, plant, equipment. You get interest deduction and you get depreciation deduction. So both of those are pretty nice. And then cash flows from cash flow statement. So there's 3 categories of cash flows. This is, so remember that my US Bank statement earlier, 82% of businesses fail because of cash flows. This is cash flow statement. This is where the actual cash is going. Operations, investing, and financing. Those are the big 3 categories. Operations is running a business. Investing is going to be the big assets. Financing is going to be that fundraising, debt, or equity.
We just talked about in class last night. Amazing.
Excellent. Look at that. So appropriate. So perfect. So I'm not going to, like my corporate finance students, I would go way in depth on how all of these numbers come to be. But for you all, just know that those are the big categories that you need to be considering looking at your business. So things that I get lots of mistakes in tax world. Buying lunch for yourself every day is not a tax write-off. People do that all the time. Yeah, so I know you probably have heard that many times, but that's just, I still see it all the time. So I met with somebody a couple weeks ago, small business, here in town kind of thing. And they are, they're going to the grocery store and they're like, oh, it's food. So it's like meals and entertainment, write-off. No, that doesn't count. One, the IRS actually has an explicit thing that grocery stores can't count for meals and entertainment, even if you are taking a client there. But even that, it's like, just don't. It boils down to just don't. So lunch for yourself is not a write-off. Your whole apartment, so I specifically said your entire rent on all of your apartment is not a write-off, but you can say, hey, I use this room as my office space and it's not my personal space. And so you can say, well, some of my apartments, so you got to divide the square footage. You say, I'm going to just easy math here. 100 square foot room is my office space. The entire apartment is 400 square feet. That means 1/4 of my rent can be attributed to my business location, right? So then you could do that, but you can't write off the entire amount all at once because all of your apartment isn't business, right? And then personal expenses for clothing, utilities, all that kind of stuff. People like to write off all their personal stuff, which is not business related, unless you're like an entertainer. There is a specific thing for if you're in Las Vegas and the clothing is like a uniform kind of thing for the entertaining that you're doing, but that's like way in the weeds. And no one here said they were an entertainer, so we'll just skip that. Awesome. What is a write-off though? Things you can write off. So you can contribute to a retirement plan as your business. So you can start a SEP IRA. I did this for my employees when I had employees. I don't right now. But when I did have employees, we opened a SEP IRA. You could open different kinds of IRA, different kinds of retirement plan accounts. But a SEP is an easy one to open. It gets a little tricky when you have lots of employees because you have to balance how much you're funding theirs versus yours. But when you add to a retirement plan on behalf of your employees, that can be a deduction. Payroll, you're paying people, so you do have to pay payroll taxes, but salaries can be something that can be written off for your business taxes. Leases, you could lease a car. One of the businesses that I consulted with here at Chicostart had a car that they leased, and that was part of the business expenses. And they used that for mostly just to go visit customers and stuff, but they used it for the business. Insurance costs, those are going to be your overhead type stuff. Depreciation, which we already talked about. If you have a car that you're using for work, you can deduct mileage. The IRS has like a formula for deducting mileage. But you have to keep track of you got to keep really good track of your records. I started here and I ended here and it was this many miles, right, for work because I went to go see this client. Like this, you got to keep really accurate records there. So something to keep up with. Paying taxes is a tax deduction. So that it just depends on what it is. So one of the clothing retailer, before we lost our inventory, we sold that clothing in lots of different states, and so then we had to keep track of how much we were paying in sales tax in different states, and we could bring that back to our write-offs here. That was years ago though. They have made some changes, and then I do see a chat that just popped up too, and then I'll say
Logan, can you check with it for?
Yeah.
I got it. Heather's.
Yeah.
I got it. Sorry, I'm taking notes.
While you pull that up, I'll just finish the last bullet point is qualified business income deduction. So you can get like, I don't know the specifics, but it's like 20% of your income or something can be written off if you are getting business income from your being an entrepreneur.
Go time.
Sure.
What about embroidered polos that have your company logo on them?
Yeah, so if it's, I guess that could, so that's a business expense for, like, it's for the employees.
Representing the
work there.
company, right?
Yeah, I'd say that that would be property of the business. So if you buy it through the business's bank account, and then you're saying that you're buying that short-term supplies type thing, that could work, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we do that here,
Mhm.
and then also, so it can be either, depending on what it's for too.
Sure.
Right? It can be a uniform,
Mhm.
right, or it can be marketing.
Sure, okay, yeah. Yep. Yeah, cool. Okay, now investing. Let me double check time since.
Yeah, you have,
Yeah, 8 minutes.
actually, we should open up to Q&A.
Let's do that.
11:52.
Yeah, because investing
Oh,
is
wow.
in succession planning and now Q&A. So
Do you want to go over succession planning real quick?
I can.
I
So
can.
there's a lot of different ways to end a business. So this is my adjustment from estate planning in the financial planning world. So estate planning is what happens when you die, have a will, have a trust, that kind of thing. In business world, you say, well, what happens when I don't want to run the business anymore? I can voluntarily leave and sell it. I can just close the business down, or I can maybe have someone else buy it. I can just, there's a lot of different choices. So there's some ways to exit a business, lots of different ways. IPO is one that everybody wishes they could do because then they become a billionaire and it's super cool. But that's not the case for a lot of startups, right? So, that's just things to think about. So we'll skip IPO and we'll just say, okay, well, what are you going to do? One way, so when I was a financial planner, FINRA, which is the financial regulator, they require me to have a succession plan in case I die and I'm managing a bunch of retirement accounts. All of my clients are screwed because I'm dead, right? And so I have to have a succession plan for what happens if I'm gone. And so there was another financial planner where he and I had an arrangement where if either one of us was gone, the other person would take over. And then, the clients have we pre-wrote out everything. So the clients get the option to leave. They don't have to stick with the new person because they might not like the new person. But then that person will figure it out. And FINRA, our regulator, is notified about that so that they can come in and say, hey, did you do the thing you're supposed to do? So that's one way to do it. A leveraged buyout on here is if somebody were to borrow money in order to purchase your company, that's an option. A cash flow exchange is, I had a friend of mine who ran an insurance company and he purchased the insurance business and then used the money that he got as income from the business to pay the person he bought it from. So he didn't have that much, he had a little bit of money up front, but mostly not that much up front. But then he paid that fee to the person who left and for a certain amount of time until that person was paid off. And so you just use the proceeds of the business to finance that exchange. That could work too. So that's just a quick overview of succession planning. Now back to Q&A.
First of all, let's give him a hand. Thank you. Right, for those of you on Zoom, right, and in the room, please, let's open up the floor for questions.
I did do Q&A throughout too, so.
Yeah,
That's true.
and
That's
quite a
true.
few.
But somebody might be saving their.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm always open for Q&A. I did put my email on there too, so you can email me questions. And then if you
Awesome.
want to schedule an appointment, csuchico.edu/financial wellness. There's a book appointment button right there, and then it just opens the calendar and you can just pick a day and time.
This will also be recorded and be sent out
Excellent.
for Chicostart. I was wondering if you guys plan on with your bakery, do you plan on having like a delivery service? Do you have vehicles? Do you have?
No, essentially what we're doing is we're doing wholesale. So we currently sell to a restaurant here in town. We're hoping to open that out to more restaurants. We've been in talks with several, and so we're just trying to nail that down, which is hard. Because they have to like get their stuff together.
Sure.
But essentially what it is, we're baking out of our home right now. The biggest thing is moving that out of our kitchen and into a different space.
Commercial.
That might look, we don't have a ton of clients at the moment, so baking at home makes more sense, but we're just. So no, we're not gonna have like delivery vehicles, we were just talking to Jacob at the beginning, we're not sure that we're gonna have a storefront, we really wanna manage it.
Like on the ghost.
Right, yeah, from like behind, like we want it to be behind the scenes, like we're just supplying all these people, they put it on their menus. Done, the end.
One of the things that we discuss in the finance world is your portfolio of all your different clients, and having more than just one opens you up to not having the big ebbs and flows of that one business's profitability.
Yeah.
So I was just actually talking to my wife this morning, I guess LaSalle's is leaving.
Yeah,
they closed.
Yeah, they're closing. So if, now that they will probably weren't a customer of yours, but if they were, and now they were your only customer and they're out of business, you lost all of your revenue.
exactly.
But if you have 10 different businesses all buying from you, one goes out, that's still unfortunate, but you still have 90% of your revenue in place. And then maybe you can, so there's kind of we call it diversification in finance. If you have a diversified portfolio of customers, then you aren't as beholden to that one client's ups and downs.
Well, and we have an interesting, like I said, we're doing it out of our own kitchen, so we have been in talks during the summer with potentially supplying a different restaurant, but their needs are so different from the restaurant that we currently supply that it was like, we couldn't, they wanted several hundred.
Yeah, we couldn't fill the
Volume
order
wise.
base.
The volume was just, it was like exponentially compared to this little restaurant, so it was like trying to figure out the balance between like,
Sure.
like we're still in our kitchen, is this gonna kill us, like,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do?
You guys look at commercial kitchens in the area?
Yeah, we have.
I figured you had. but
Yeah, there's
Is that prohibited as well?
no, actually, there's a new restaurant that's starting up in the space where, the End Zone and the lab.
Discovery?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have a really big kitchen. We've been talking to the owner, been kind enough to maybe to offer us perhaps.
Interesting, because your hours would be different.
They would be
Bakery
very
hours are
different.
different.
That's true.
They would
Yeah.
be very different. So, yeah, we're moving.
Yeah.
Where did you go to see, or like, I guess, did you just ask around town or such, because I guess for the kombucha and.
No, totally, I get it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has been leveraging
People we already know.
personal contacts, really,
We knew
because,
the family of the restaurant we supply already.
yeah. I'm like totally happy to talk to you about that stuff too, so I can let you know what it is.
I had a client that had a commercial kitchen space in Orland,
Mhm.
so that worked out really well for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Live Life, that's where they had theirs at the pizza stop, and so did they were on the milk, they were sharing space for a long time. And then they finally were able to move out of there and get their own little hole in the wall kitchen. Actually, it was just not the space, it didn't have a kitchen for that. And then they moved into the pie wagon storefront.
Great,
They're
you
like-
already know the industry very well.
They have a dope business model.
Yeah.
And like, I love, it started farmer's market and now they're just like, you can totally do that. This town is so like,
Farmer market
receptive.
friendly and receptive to local foodies.
yes,
Okay.
so true. And especially if your product is like off the chain, like they're gonna be.
All right, I'm sorry to cut this party short because this has been
It's
very
been-
useful, but let's give Jacob another hand, please. Thank you so much for the time to support Chicostart and support all these local entrepreneurs. Again, if you have any additional questions or want to set up one-on-one time with Jacob, who is our subject matter expert, right? His email is there. It's jarbogast@csuchico.edu. And we'll post this kind of this information as well in Eric somehow.
Social
Right.
media,
Social media. Thank
our
you.
website,
Okay, I'm sorry.
our website.
Oh, and our website, right. All right, so wrapping it up, thank you again, everyone on Zoom for joining us today and everyone in the room. Thank you.
Yeah, even if
Thanks, everybody.
Yay.
Good day, everyone.
Amanda.
All right.
I was.
I did have one, quick question, Jacob.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, we dropped a lot of good gems.
No worries.